we're going to talk another skill position here, wide receiver. And this is a bet that I made at 3.5. I took the over when the number first hit. I thought it was a bad number. And then since then, I have grown less fond of this bet. There was a general consensus amongst everyone that Quentin Johnston was going to be a first rounder.
He flashed as the odds-on favorite early in the process.
And then he started falling and started falling and started falling to the point now where it looks like Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison are fairly comfortable to go in the first round. Pretty much all of the respected mock drafts that I look at have them going in the first round. Only about 60% of them have Quentin Johnston going in the first round. So this kind of 3.5 number really is super interesting. John, I bet the over, thinking that one, Johnston was most likely to go in the first round, and two, that maybe one of these other receivers would start gaining some steam as well. Like I thought Josh Downs, whenever we looked at his tape, was probably going to get some steam. I thought Jalen Hyatt, him being kind of the only real over the top burner of the top guys, maybe would gain some steam as well. That just never ended up coming to fruition, and so now it really looks like Smith-Njigba, Flowers, and Addison. And if we get a fourth, it's kind of a toss-up here. What does your gut tell you?
My gut would tell me that I think Quentin Johnston still finds his way into the first round. Although you're talking about where we're at in terms of this market, maybe a little less confident about it, but I think he is the piece. And I also think there is something to be said of a 6'4", 250-pound X receiver who has like a vertical route tree to him. And there's a lot of teams that would like that. And what's interesting about wide receiver, Matt, is we can evaluate wide receivers, but wide receivers are interesting when it comes to the draft because I call them like personal selections, right? It's how your wide receiver room is already constructed. Right. It's what you feel like you need as an offense. A team might value a Zay Flowers more than a Quentin Johnston because they already have a wideout X guy who's about 6'3" or 6'4", while another team has a bunch of smaller dudes who really feel like they need a 6'4" guy on the outside. So I think given his physical skill set and what he can actually do, I think there is something to be said still that you're going to get 4 and you're going to get Johnston in this first round. But when you're talking about betting it, when you're banking on just that one guy to get in, I think that's where you're kind of playing with fire. Yeah, that's kind of and I think if you have the over like I do, you are probably going to be sweating this until the very last pick in the first round when it gets to the Chiefs. Because if you've invested $500 million in Patrick Mahomes, he currently has a wide receiver room of Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore. Now, I don't know if he values any of these other guys, but I think I'd have the conversation with Patrick Mahomes, and I'd say, like, hey, do any of these guys tickle your fancy? And if so, we're going to draft them because, again, we've invested $500 million in you. They got Sky Moore early last year.
So, I mean, a receiver room, and I get it. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Andy Reid. They somehow seem to figure out a way to get it done no matter what every single year. But you can't be jumping up and down with MVS, Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore as your 3 receivers heading into the season. Right. And I think a lot of people hear that and go, they just won the Super Bowl. But no, you want to maximize what you have. Right. And adding to that room, which is still arguably their weakest position group right now, it would make a ton of sense. And especially if we're talking about having that last pick and having a guy like Quentin Johnston, who at one point was considered maybe the best receiver in this class, now sitting there, I think it would be too hard to pass if you're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. And there are markets out there, again, if you go to DraftKings and you just click, and it is, will a guy, yes or no, well, it's actually just it's a one-way market on will they be a first rounder, right? And so here's the interesting thing to me about this. So the over-under 3.5 is 115 on both sides. Quentin Johnston to be a first rounder is minus 400. Right. So if we believe in Jaxon Smith-Njigba and we believe in Addison, then Quentin Johnston at minus 400, that's kind of saying that we're going to have 4 receivers, right? Yeah. I mean, like, that's kind of what we're looking at here. I guess the only question is just Zay Flowers then. Right. But it does seem that Zay Flowers is safely in the first round if you read anything in terms of what is thought of him as a receiver. So anyway, just pointing that out, that those odds are posted out there, and that's kind of how we're trying to read some of these tea leaves as well.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.